Hey everybody, I'm the Drink Pro. It's a rye side-by-side with Elijah Craig and Sazerac. What's up everybody, Kyle the Drink Pro here with you yet again. Thank you as always for watching this video, liking, sharing, subscribing. Everything you do to support the channel means the world to me. Today, I was really excited, guys. I was like, yes, I get to get the jump on some whiskey reviews. The Elijah Craig Rye just hit in my area. Indianapolis just got a whole bunch of these. And then I go and start to do some research and I find out that a ton of whiskey tubers have had the chance to review the Elijah Craig Rye already. No matter, because I've decided to do something I haven't seen other people doing. A side-by-side between two barely legal ryes. Now, why are they called barely legal ryes? Because they are both 51% rye. So they only just meet the technical definition of rye here in the United States. Now, it is worth pointing out that I'm assuming the Sazerac Rye is 51% rye. Technically, Buffalo Trace doesn't disclose their mash bills, but everyone sort of assumed it's a barely legal rye. It's the low rye mash bill from Buffalo Trace, and I've heard different percentages, but generally speaking, it's 51% rye, 39% corn, and the rest is malted barley. The Sazerac Rye is non-age stated and it's 90 proof, 45% alcohol. I've actually already done a full review of the Sazerac Rye. If you check out here in the corner, my beginner's guide to rye, you can see it there. So control-click that and watch later. But for now, I'm actually more excited to talk about the Elijah Craig Rye. This is something that's a relatively new product coming out of Heaven Hill. It is also non-age stated and also has 51% rye. Now, the other percentages are a little bit different though. There's probably a very slight difference in the amount of corn in the Elijah Craig product. We do know that it's 51% rye, 35% corn, 14% malted barley. So just a slight increase in corn, decrease in malted barley for the Sazerac Rye as compared to the Elijah Craig Rye. Again, it's also non-age stated, but importantly, it's slightly higher proof, 47% alcohol as opposed to 45. We'll see how much of a difference that makes in the tasting. It's also worth noting that Pikesville and Rittenhouse Rye both have the same mash bill as this Elijah Craig Rye. So if you like one or both of those, it should be informative as to how you feel about this particular bottle. The MSRP on the Elijah Craig Rye is, I think, $30. I ended up paying a little bit more for mine, but that's pretty comparable to the Sazerac Rye. I think I've seen the Sazerac Rye's $50 secondary market, maybe slightly more now, but I think the MSRP is very comparable. So this may just come down to a question of whether you like Heaven Hill products or Buffalo Trace products better, but there's only really one way to find out. We gotta taste them. By the way, these Drink Pro glasses are not gonna be around a lot longer. If you want one, now is the time to buy, guys. I should also mention that the Sazerac Rye is pretty low. There's not a lot of liquid left in the bottle, and I talk a lot about the difference between a neck pour and a pour at the bottom of the bottle. I know it's a relatively fresh pour on the Elijah Craig and a relatively stale pour on the Sazerac, but I will say this bottle disappeared very quickly. I used it as part of a private tasting I ran, and it ended up being very quickly drank. So this is not as stale as it might appear on first glance. Also, I'm using stale very colloquially. Whiskey doesn't go stale. It just might not be as fresh. Okay, let's get into this. I was actually gonna start with the Elijah Craig, but because it's lower proof, I think I'm actually gonna start with the Sazerac. It definitely smells like a rye, and I will say again, I'm not gonna give too many tasting notes because I've already done a review on this. But it's sweet, very rye grain forward, a little bit of honey. Very much what you would expect from a low rye. Go ahead and taste it just to sort of wet my palate. I always taste it 3 times to get a good sense of the whiskey. And again, these are both NAS products, non-age stated, so it is going to be lighter, brighter. I get quite a bit of grain on this rye, and part of that is because there's probably some young distillate in this. That second taste gave me a surprising amount of bitterness, actually. It's not really barrel tannins, I don't think, but there's some kind of bitter component in here. Yeah, and third time's the charm. It's a simple, easy drinking rye. It's a low rye mash bill, so it's not going to overpower you with grain, although there is a significant grain component. You can actually also taste the corn in this, which really stands out to me. Being a non-age stated product, there's definitely some young bourbon-esque flavors coming off of this. So let's move to the main show. This is really more of a comparison, but I wanted to wet my whistle first, and second, start with the lower proof pour. So coming in now, just slightly higher proof, is the Elijah Craig Rye. This is what people came for, I'm assuming. Oh wow, and right off the bat, this has a real nuttiness and a slight oakiness that's very prominent, especially compared side by side with that Sazerac. It's creamy. I get a lot of caramel and vanilla. Honestly, as much as the Sazerac rye reminds me of bourbon in certain ways, the Elijah Craig rye is far more bourbon-esque. It's hard, honestly, to tell that it's not bourbon, just based on the nose. Definitely get some really light, creamy, airy sugar vibes like cotton candy or caramel corn. It's very much in that sweet, sugary candy vibe on the nose, which is so unique to me compared to the Sazerac. I mean, this Sazerac just almost smells sharp and grain forward, whereas the Elijah Craig, it's a lot more rounded and sweet and soft. And man, that nuttiness is throwing me off. I mean, I know Heaven Hill often has a nutty component for some people, but I kind of didn't expect it from this Elijah Craig rye. That's what I get for stirring too fast. I'm making a mess here. I will say the Elijah Craig rye didn't get great reviews. It was kind of put down by a lot of people, but at least on the nose, I really like what's going on with it. Now, I think if you compare it to an Elijah Craig bourbon, you might get a different result, but I really wanted to do rye to rye, apples to apples here. I don't like comparing ryes to bourbons because then what you're really telling is the mash bill difference. And sometimes that's good, but when you want a low rye whiskey, you want to compare different things in the same category. You don't want to compare it to a bourbon, because if you wanted a bourbon, you would have bought a bourbon. Seems obvious, but it's not for a lot of people. All right, the more time I spend with the nose, the more that grain starts to come out, but it's still more corn grain than rye grain. I also get a really subtle hint of like chocolate and oak. They're very, very subtle, very, very background. The NAS really is showing up on this. I get hints of the older whiskey and some hints of the younger whiskey. That's, to me, typically where that candy vibe, that candy corn vibe can come from. But to me, overall, it's a very balanced. Oh, Jesus, I'm making a mess. Guess I'll just rub it in, right? Get a good smell. Let's take some lemons and make it lemonade. Well, now it just smells straight up like rye grain. That's good to know, though, I guess. Let's taste this thing. There it is. All that grain. All that grain. This really oaky, nutty, dry mid-palate into the finish. Wow, that does not taste like it smells at all to me. I was expecting a lot more sweetness on the front end. Didn't get it. Yeah, and after tasting it, I go back to the nose and I start to get an almost herbal quality. Definitely get the rye grain. This one really changes a lot. All right, let's taste it again. Here we go. You know, this might be better at a higher proof, but for me, it falls pretty flat at 94%. Proof. 94% is a different vibe. I mean, I do get a little bit of leather in the mid-palate, definitely some nuttiness. A hint of black pepper shows up into the finish, and oakiness as well. This has definitely got a lot more nuttiness, oakiness, dark earth flavors compared to the Sazerac, which is much lighter and brighter, herbal, floral. Not really much fruit in either one of these. That's kind of to be expected given the price point, given the product profile. That said, I do think this is generally a good comparison of the difference between a Sazerac product or a Buffalo Trace product and an Elijah Craig or a Heaven Hill product. You're going to be having a divide between general profile, general product presentation. If you like your Elijah Craig and you like ryes coming out of Heaven Hill, this will probably be satisfactory at $38 MSRP, the same way that you're getting what you pay for in a Sazerac rye. I really just expect more sweetness on the front end of the Elijah Craig, and I keep not getting it. I keep wanting it, and I keep not getting it. The front end is very light, very delicate, and then you kind of get hit in the face with a nuttiness, an oakiness, a dryness, and then some of that earth spice, maybe leather, maybe a hint of tobacco, but not sweet tobacco, a dry tobacco, which is different. If you ever smoked cigars, you'll know the difference very clearly. You know, generally speaking, I enjoy both Buffalo Trace products and Heaven Hill products, but I gotta give an edge to the Sazerac in this price point and with this profile of a low rye mash bill rye whiskey. I think if you really prefer a nutty, earthy, slightly oaky and dry whiskey, you will lean towards the Elijah Craig over the Sazerac, but that's not my typical profile. My typical profile is fruitier, sweeter, maybe a little brighter, and even floral and even lemony. You get more things in that category with the Sazerac rye, and you get the rye grain more predominantly. So for $30 MSRP, I think it's a pretty solid whiskey. I wouldn't feel bad about spending that kind of money if I wanted a 51% rye whiskey. I do think there are others in that category that are comparable, maybe as good, maybe better. So I'm not sure it's gonna stand out from the pack. But if you like Elijah Craig and you like a drier, more oaky, maybe more nutty whiskey, it might be a good option for you. That said, I can't really recommend it. It's just okay, which in the world of whiskey today is not good enough. There is so much good product out there, I can't recommend it. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. I hope you will join me Thursday for the live stream where I'm going to have an amazing lineup of Four Roses products. The Al Young, the 2020, 19, 18, 17, 16, 15, 14, 13, and 12 limited editions. It's going to be a hell of a night. Please join me if you can. In the meantime, keep drinking like professionals. Cheers.